So this is my video presentation for CH203. I did this is for April 20th. I wasn't able to do it on the date of, but so this is my presentation. My three readings that I did for this week was George Kennan's The Long Telegram, or excerpts from it, which was dated 1950. No, 46. Sorry, 1946. And it was George Kennan addressing the situation with the Soviet Union. Um, so Kennan basically summarizes the situation as the Soviets are living in a system that is hell bent on destroying the West. And as a result, they will try, even if they do deal in good faith, they'll probably, or they seem to deal in good faith, they'll probably revert to subversion. So, as a result, the U.S. has to counter this through not just through what he basically says is through the Marshall Plan, and then through other foreign aid, and then also just to show the Soviets through a force of strength, which apparently to Kennan is the only thing that the Russians and the Soviets in general respect. Whether or not that's true, is another thing. His evidence for it is, he has done his own research along with military research, like or the army. He's done surveys. He says, but it's interesting in light of how little we actually knew about the Soviet Union versus and then how little they knew about us. So it's a very interesting document in that regard. So the second document is excerpts from NSC 68's National Security Council conference in 1950. And it confirms a lot of what Kennan was saying. It sets up the East-West dichotomy, the fundamental, design of the Soviets to undermine the West, to eliminate our authority, to use their military, and to attack across Europe, and across the world, really. So, by the NSC was predicting that their nuclear, weapons as well would increase in stockpile, and by mid 1954, they were thinking they'd have 200 nukes or something like that. So it was definitely the NSC thought that our military capabilities, in particular, were not adequate on the ground initially to stop a Soviet invasion. Like if we were to try to stop them in a conventional war, would take time for our troops to get to the front. If assuming we didn't annihilate each other, because at 1950 we had more nukes than the Soviets for sure, but it wasn't. They were developing at a quickening pace. The conclusion is basically that while they should always try to negotiate with the Soviets, we need to build up our military, our economic, and our political alliances across the world in order to counter the Soviet threat. And it's probably this is the telegram. This NSC Council meeting is what helps and strengthen NATO. Maybe not directly, but it's definitely a confirmation of the deepening world alliances that are cropping up against the Soviets. And the final reading is from the intro from Juan Jose Arevallo's book, The Shark and the Sardines, and it basically describes how the United States has transformed itself from a liberty-loving nation to a nation of imperialists, and how, as a result, now guys like Dwight Eisenhower and Robert Dole, who helped liberate Europe, is now subjugating Guatemala. Arevalo was the president of the overthrown Republic of Guatemala. He wrote the book is from 1956, so 2 years after his overthrow in 54. So Arevalo rails against U.S. imperialism, the change in U.S. values, the two-faced way that we said one thing and did another, it in particular, it denounced how the White House had and how Americans in general, maybe not the American people, but how the American government has essentially determined that it is all right to exploit and terrorize the people of South America. Going back before the Cold War too, but in particular like the Cold War reasoning behind it, it was the new face to an old problem. So yeah, so in conclusion, these three readings really show it shows U.S. fears and also U.S. the what so our fears, what we thought our capabilities were, and we thought the Russian capabilities were, and more importantly, it showed the aftermath of what happens is when we go and start overthrowing countries because we think they're communist. They end up hating us for reasons that might not have been originally for that, but now like we've intertwined it together. So I'm not saying there weren't communists in Guatemala, because there probably were, but we made the situation worse by creating a dictatorship. Sure, we might have saved money in the meantime, but in the long run, Guatemalans rightfully, and Latin Americans in general, as Arevalo was kind of speaking for, fed up. They're fed up, rightfully so, with our our violation of of their natural rights. So yeah, that's my presentation. Thank you very much.